Dear Chairman, dear Mr. Berger, distinguished speakers, distinguished guests, dear all, dear friends, chers amis, I'm delighted to deliver this speech on the 7th edition of the Conference of Paris in front of key economic partners, stakeholders, men and women engaged to bridge the divide. I would like to thank the IEFA for its kind invitation. I'm all the more delighted that this fireside session deals with a topic which has been at the cornerstone of my political and public engagement for more than 30 years, which is Europe. All of us in this room know how hard Europe is coping with cumulative and intertwined crises since 2020. Whether it is the sanitary, geopolitical, energy or the environmental crisis, public and private stakeholders have been trying to first understand how these crises have affected our economies and look at their long-lasting impact. And second, to innovate in order to come up with new solutions and to implement them in order to precisely tackle the negative effects of these crises. To confront these crises, one answer surely stems from bigger cooperation with financial markets throughout Europe. I will therefore shape my presentation around one single question. How does strengthening our financial markets will help our economies to further absorb current and future crises? Therefore, I'll start by first outlining the main economic and financial challenges at stake in Europe. Europe is actually, as I said, going through what I call a polycrisis, to quote the former President of the European Commission and friend of mine, Jean-Claude Juncker. The first challenge is the sanitary, geopolitical, and let's never forget it, environmental crisis disrupting the course of our economy. Since 2020, our European economies are facing a multifaceted and large-scale supply shock with shortcomings in our supply chains. This situation has been, as you know, amplified since 2022 with the Russian war of aggression in Ukraine. Since February 2022, we are coping specifically with a brutal drop in the supply of fossil fuels, certain food products and raw materials. Regarding our environment, this last summer speaks for itself. Hottest summer ever recorded in Europe and in the world. Massive wildfires in Greece or in Spain, devastating floods in Slovenia. We are getting closer to a climatic tipping point after which, and we need to keep it in mind, all our efforts to fight climate change may be idle. Antonio Guterres, the United Nations Secretary General, put it simply with those words this summer: the era of global warming has ended. It is the era of global boiling which has arrived. The second challenge stems from this polycrisis. The high inflation and high indebtedness of European economies are pulling down Europe's economic growth capabilities. You know that. With the supply stress and cumulative crises, our inflation has become a burden which we all share. Our annual inflation in the Eurozone has reached a record high 8.5% in 2022. However, inflation is now slowing down, standing at 2.9% year on year in October. It is still not getting close enough to the ECB's 2% target. The latter forecast the inflation in the Eurozone to reach this 2% target only in the second half of 2025. So let's wait a bit. All in all, inflation exerts a strong downforce on our growth capacity, with the ECB forecasting a growth of only 0.7% in 2023, 1% in 2024, and 1.5% in 2025 for the Eurozone. Some countries are still managing to foster growth. France is not in recession. It's quite relatively strong position right now, while Germany is, but inflation does not ease our economic situation. We also need to look at the public finances situation of EU member states. Currently, I chair the Cour des Comptes, which is the supreme audit institution in France. I know that well. With the necessary high public investments undertaken by governments, the debt to GDP ratio at 83.1% in the EU, more than 90% in the Eurozone, some 110% in this country, France. It's needless to say that the member state situation, when we look at debt ratios and public bond yield, are not uniform across the EU. It can still pose a risk of growing divergence between Eurozone countries. You know, my former tenure as the EU Commissioner taught me to never comment an ECB decision, but I want simply to say that we should not forget this heterogeneity, all the more when the ECB rates have been raised 10 times since July 2022, shifting from a negative rate deposit facility of minus 0.5% to 4% positive, which of course creates a totally different environment for public finances. So, now that I've said all that, why do we need to strengthen our financial markets? I strongly believe that strengthening the European financial sector by putting forward both the Capital Markets Union and Banking Union, still unfinished, will help economies to cope better with crises. First, let us remember how historical is the Next Generation EU plan to fund EU common answers to new challenges. The Recovery Plan for Europe, Next Gen EU, is revolutionary. It consists of 750 billion euros, constituting the heart of the Union response to the health crisis. And this is undoubtedly a measure which was eagerly awaited, not only by the countries most affected by the crisis, but also by European citizens who have long waited for a strong signal for Europe. For me, Next Gen EU is not and should not be a one-shot action, a one-off. It is a starting point, paving the way towards a lasting common budgetary approach shared by all the member states. It will be pivotal for helping countries to tackle new challenges with direct grants and loans. Firstly, we still need a stronger European Capital Markets Union, or CMU, that would support the EU to achieve its green transition and strategic autonomy. I would say that we cannot reach those objectives without the Capital Market Union. We see a huge demand for private financing to fund the massive investments required by the green and digital transformations. With the complex fiscal situation of member states, which I recalled a minute ago, fostering cross-border private investments to complete future public investments is becoming necessary. In France, a report by two renowned French economists, Jean Pisani-Ferry and Selma Mahfouz, details how much investment is needed for the green transition only. To develop our capital market union, a few steps have already been taken. In December 2019, the Council set its core objectives to deepen the CMU, and this includes strengthening access to finance for EU businesses, removing structural and legal barriers to increase cross-border capital flows, supporting the transition to sustainable economies, and strengthening the EU's global competitiveness. In September 20, in the midst of the pandemic, the Commission updated these findings and published a new action plan. And in December 2022, so recently, the European Commission has unveiled a package of measures aimed at boosting Europe's capital market. And now, Mario Draghi is also working on EU competitiveness. I'm very glad that the Council is, throughout 2023, making significant progress on new legislative proposals. The push made by France and Germany shows how important the new initiatives are decisive for us, notably a new strategy to make compensatory financial services more attractive and more resilient in Europe. Secondly, a deepened banking union would further reduce the risk of banks' sovereign vicious loops, which we attended to during the financial crisis now almost 15 years ago, all the more with the worsening budgetary situation of EU member states. What I suggest there is quite simple. We need to further neutralize and pool some of the financial risks for states should a bank failure happen under one jurisdiction. In order to block direct contagion from banks to sovereigns, public guarantees must be reduced and the remaining guarantees transferred to the European level. So deposit guarantees have also to be neutralized. The European Commission made a proposal to this effect in 2015, which is 8 years ago, and it's blocked by Germany since then. I welcome the recent legislative proposal on bank crisis management and deposit insurance. That goes the right way to enhance harmonization between member states, notably on mutualized deposit guarantees in Europe and an orderly market exit of small banks. This reform has the full support of the ECB. Let us finally adopt this legislation before next year's European election in June. So, strengthening the Union's financial reintegration is a key, an integral part of a larger trend of economic deepening and fiscal integration in the wake of the political crisis affecting since 2020 Europe, and we need to go all through this way. This brings me now to my conclusion. The situation we now find ourselves during this conference is unprecedented in many ways. The uncertainty we are facing on the economic and fiscal front is a cause of concern for many of us. But I'm optimistic. I'm not saying that we are facing now 30 years of high growth. No, it's difficult. It's a tough time, but we can make it. We will find a way. We always do. Our economy, thanks to public and private stakeholders like you, have the capacities to better absorb the effects of the crises we'll face. It is now time to advocate for stronger financial market in Europe, so that we can all further and better deliver on shared objectives. I'm confident in Europe, more than ever. I would say, but this is not what I was asked to speak about, that the main risks are not financial, are not economy. We are a strong economy and we have strong finances. It's geopolitics and politics and the rise of populism. But this is another story I'm not going to dwell in, and I thank you very much for your attention.